It's week 13, and we have 5 Big Mountain Ice Cold locks.
College football is going strong, and we're back on the Big Mountain, where we bring you a detailed focus on the Big Ten and the Mountain West.
Here we are, week 13, the last week, I guess you would say, of the regular season before our championship games. Rivalries galore, and we're going to start with the Big Ten. We'll jump right into it, Steve. I think you have 2 locks for us. Is that right?
Yep.
All right, let's hear it. What we got?
Let's roll right into it, right into the picks here. I've got 2 locks. I'm going to start with a lock, and I'm going to end with a lock.
Okay.
And just to give a little tease, I am going to lock the biggest game of the week this week, the Ohio State-Michigan game.
Oh, my.
That'll be my last one, but I'll start with another lock that we got here.
Okay.
So I think you're going to like this one, okay?
Oh, all right.
Northwestern at Illinois. Northwestern's getting 5.5 points. Illinois is just not a place where there's much of a home field advantage. I think this game is probably about a coin flip. Illinois, a solid team, but not great. Not as good as I expected this year.
Yeah.
And Northwestern's been on that upward trend. Their coach has those guys just running around, playing great. So I'm going to go ahead and take Northwestern plus the 5.5, Northwestern plus the points, and I'm going to make that my first Big Mountain ice cold lock. Northwestern plus 5.5.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I saw that line. I didn't know what you were going to do. And I actually thought, you know what, Steve? I think Steve's going to take Illinois here, and I'm going to have to, again, disagree with him. But I don't have to disagree with you. I love the pick. I think what Northwestern wins it straight up again. That would be the trifecta. You know, they got points the past 2 weeks, and they won straight up. I could see the same thing happening here this week. They went straight up against Illinois. But I agree with you. Coin flip to 3 to maybe a field goalie type game.
Right. With totally 5.5 points, I loved it so much I had to lock it.
Love it. Okay.
All right. Okay, so moving along right into my picks, Iowa at Nebraska. So Iowa's already clinched a spot in the Big Ten West.
Right.
Very emotional game last week where they clinched that spot. They have a chance to go 10-2 and double-digit wins. They are at Nebraska. I pretty much view this game as another coin flip game. I could see either team winning. Iowa's getting the points. They're getting 2.5 points. So I'm just going to go ahead and take Iowa plus the points. I see this as a very low scoring game. I didn't take the under this week. I looked at it. It was like 25.5.
I saw that too.
Which was crazy. I was hoping if it was like 28, 29, 30, I would have been all over that. But 25.5, just stay away from that. But it could go under that. Low scoring, close game. I'm taking Iowa plus 2.5.
Are you surprised they're getting points in this game?
Not necessarily, because I think it's a coin flip game for the most part, and it's at Nebraska. But I feel good about Iowa plus 2.5.
Yeah, I would too. Yeah. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So next, I think the next game might actually be the first game of the week. Penn State at Michigan State. It's on Friday evening.
Yes.
Prime time on NBC. It's going to be it's not really at Michigan State. It's going to be at Ford Field in Detroit. So they're playing in an NFL stadium. This is a big spectacle game that NBC wanted to put on. Now, obviously, I'm guessing they hope that, Michigan State will be a little bit better this year when they pick this.
Yes.
But still, this is kind of, even though Penn State says they're unrivaled, this has kind of become, over the last 10 years, maybe their rivalry game to end it. The Land-Grant Trophy, 2016, the game that you and I were at, they beat Michigan State to clinch a spot in the Big Ten West, Big Ten championship game, which is the only time since James Franklin's gotten there they played in that game. So every year, this is a big game for both teams. Penn State the line is Penn State minus 20.5. I really feel good about Penn State being at least 3 touchdowns better than Michigan State this year. Now, some of the scoring may come into play. We don't know about Drew Aller yet. Obviously, he's more of the throwing quarterback. If he's not available to go, Bo Perbula is definitely more of a running quarterback. Penn State still scores points with him. His first play, he comes in the game and runs for 40 yards down the sideline. So they're still dangerous. So that could affect the scoring a little bit. I think without that uncertainty, I think actually the line would be a little bit higher. But I feel good about taking Penn State to cover 20.5 at Michigan State playing in Ford Field.
Okay, so no, you don't have any strong update on Aller.
No, he's
pretty tight to the chest.
So I've watched practice reports. James Franklin said he's going to play. He was pretty unequivocal that he's going to play. However, he didn't throw at practice. He was out at practice, taking handoffs, whatever. At first, we thought it was kind of head injury or whatever, but it looks like it's probably the shoulder.
Okay.
And so they're probably just babying that shoulder a little bit. And you know what? I think that they feel comfortable going to Bo Prabula. So if Aller starts the game and he just can't throw, can't do it, they'll go to him. But I don't really see it as a huge difference in the game. I feel pretty good about it either way for Penn State to cover that 20.5.
Okay, yeah, certainly you don't think Michigan State's going to be scoring many points here, I would think. So.
No.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Okay, so I'm moving right along. Indiana at Purdue. Both of these teams, they're just meh. They're just whatever. They are what they are. Again, I really look at this as another coin flip game. I don't see with this year's Purdue team, I don't see a big home field advantage for them.
Yeah. I
see it basically as a coin flip game. Could go either way.
Right.
This is their rivalry week game, obviously. Both in-state rivals. And Indiana's getting 3.5 points.
Okay.
Which I really like. It's over that field goal. So I'm going to go ahead and take Indiana plus the points. Indiana plus 3.5.
Okay. All
right. Okay. So moving right along here. Minnesota. Okay. Wisconsin at Minnesota. Two kind of disappointing teams.
Struggling teams here. Yeah.
Wisconsin they've not been where I thought they would be this year. I really thought they would contend for the Big Ten West.
Yep.
Minnesota's been okay. They got that fluky win over Iowa.
Yep.
Their secondary is just awful. Their quarterback can make some plays, or the quarterback is going to make plays either for his team or the other team. The Greek rifle, I think they call him.
Okay.
I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name.
Yeah.
I just my brain kind of told me at the beginning when I first looked at this game, Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin is a better team. Yes. However, it's at Minnesota. They played well at home.
Yeah.
And Wisconsin has just been disappointing. Games that they should have won, they just didn't win.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota has a good, solid run defense, and that's what Wisconsin wants to do.
Okay.
So I think they match up well. So I have this as a coin flip game, so I'm going to go ahead and take Mini plus the points, Mini plus 2.5.
Okay. All right. I'm a little surprised that line is that close. I thought Mini maybe would get a little bit more points than that, but as you said, Wisconsin's just been a disappointment from pretty early on. I mean, and you tried, you go back about 9 weeks ago, you were giving them the benefit of the doubt as the team that, and they just
can't do it anymore.
They just can't do it.
No. Yeah, and I think, this game, very similar to that Iowa game where you were surprised about that line. I think Vegas, and I see it in both games, and I think Vegas does as well, sees them at a coin flip.
Okay.
So with the other game, that you do have the road team, Iowa, so maybe they see it a little better as a coin than a coin flip because they're giving them points.
Right.
This one, Minnesota's at home hosting Wisconsin. They're getting 2.5 points, so I'm just going to go ahead and take Mini plus the points.
Okay.
All right, moving forward, my last regular pick game is Maryland at Rutgers, okay? Two teams I was down on to begin the season. I think they both have had times where they performed a little better than I expected.
Yes.
And then other times where they performed exactly as I expected.
Right.
I do think maybe right now Rutgers is probably maybe just a better all-around team as far as defense, running the ball. I like their quarterback. He's a dynamic player.
Yeah.
The game's at Rutgers. Maryland just came off a game they played pretty well last week against Michigan.
Right.
The line is Maryland minus 1.5. I'm going to go ahead and take Maryland minus 1.5, even though I think Rutgers might be a better all-around team right now today.
Okay.
Here's the reason. Rutgers just played Penn State, and that was really a body bag game. By the end of the game, Rutgers just ran out the clock. When they were losing, and they just ran out the clock because they were running out of healthy offensive players to put out there.
Okay.
So many players went out of this game. It was a tough and physical game. Similar to, I really think, Michigan after that Penn State game. Penn State, to me, is one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in the country, very physical. Both of these teams took a beating. Michigan the week after looked a little sluggish.
Yeah.
I think Rutgers is going to do the same thing. I think they might have some players not available or just kind of be sluggish after just a really physical beatdown game.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and take Maryland to cover 1.5 points. It's really at 1.5. It's kind of a toss-up, kind of a coin flip, but I'm going to take Maryland.
Yeah, I think your reasoning checks out. I mean, when you use Michigan as a prime example as to what they look like after playing Penn State, I totally get what you're feeling about Rutgers there and watching the game and how they got beat up. I think that aside, I would like Rutgers getting the point in this game or 1.5 in this game. But if their health is of a concern in any way, I totally understand where you're going there.
Yeah, and it is important to note, I'm pretty sure Rutgers has already locked up bowl eligibility.
Okay.
If they were fighting for bowl eligibility, maybe they would throw some guys out there that were injured. But if they have some guys that are borderline that kind of took a beating last week, I think they might just be willing to just, okay, let's look forward towards going to a bowl game.
Okay.
All right, but it's a good segue there talking about Michigan into our last game, okay, the biggest game of the week, probably the biggest game of the year in college football.
Yes.
Ohio State at Michigan, okay. Definitely there were parts of the season where I was low on Ohio State. Their quarterback just kind of wasn't. He didn't seem like he had it all together.
Right.
But he's progressed, gotten a little bit better. Like we've talked about a million times, they have Marvin Harrison Jr., probably the best overall player in college football. They got Trevion Henderson back this last week, and he looks like he might be the best running back in college football since he's been back. He's been really, really good. So they have a dynamic. Their offense is back to, instead of just being, hey, chuck it over to Marvin Harrison, now they've got a dangerous running game. They have a dangerous passing game. On top of very solid defense. I don't know if they're top 2 or 3 in the country, but at least probably top 5 to top 10 in the country. Really good against the run, although there has been a couple teams that have been able to run on them and be physical on them. So that's one kind of area to look at, and that's Michigan's strength. But their secondary is really, really good. They have some good pass rush specialists. I think that they could get after J.J. McCarthy and just kind of get in his kitchen, make him uncomfortable, which that's kind of what you have to do. Michigan, again, we've talked about them extensively this year. Great overall team, all kinds of talent and experience up and down the roster. They've looked a little off the last couple of weeks. I think that, that physical game at Penn State kind of took something out of them, and then also all those distractions off the field. I mean, you can come together emotionally at one point, and have a really good game because of adversity, but eventually it's going to take a toll on you.
Right.
And they've been dealing with this for basically the whole season. Now, it is at Michigan, okay, and Michigan has won the last 2 games. Ohio State is getting 3.5 points, okay?
All right.
I see this as more likely Ohio State winning straight up. If I had to pick the game straight up, I would pick Ohio State.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take Ohio State plus 3.5 points. I'm going to make that a Big Mountain ice cold lock. Ohio State plus 3.5 as they travel to the Big House. I think they're going to upset the Michigan Wolverines, and that's my Big Mountain ice cold lock.
I think that's a great pick. I mean, I think coming into this game, you have one team that's definitely, they've just been, while you mentioned you were a little bit unimpressed with the quarterback situation and things early on in the year, they've just had a nice steady trajectory over the course of the year, building up to this game, building up to potentially the college football playoffs. Michigan, I think, started that way. I mean, we talked early on. You actually went, bet against Michigan in the first 4 games.
Harbaugh was suspended.
And you kind of started off that way, but I really feel like they've planed off a little bit, and I think it's a good point. One game of it could be motivation. Is it now a distraction? Does it take away from these players and being focused on what they did? We talked about that several weeks ago as, how are they going to handle this? Is it going to be a motivation or is it going to be a distraction? And I think you make a great point there for a very short, a 1-game type of deal, absolutely motivating. The longer it goes on, the more distracting it's got to be, just those unknowns. And you look at Ohio State, Harrison Jr. is just an insurance policy.
Yeah.
He's a straight insurance policy. If everything else isn't going right, get the ball to him. I mean, nobody in the country has an insurance policy like that.
Yep.
I will say the receiver in Washington's pretty awesome too. But Harrison Jr. is just on a different level there. So I think he is their insurance policy. And I will say I was a little negative on the Penn State coaches a few weeks ago when we did an episode on Penn State firing their offensive coordinator. And I was kind of questioning them and how they were using Aller. And, you've got to coach to your players' strengths and or weaknesses. I think Ohio State is the epitome of that over several years. They know what their players can and can't do. They put them in positions to win. They don't ask them to do too much. And, I've seen that from Ohio State, and I think this is just another year they've done that with their quarterback. They're putting him in he's not going to light the world on fire like some of their previous quarterbacks, at least for this year, have done. But they put him in the position to be successful. And I give a lot of credit to the Ohio State coaches to do that. I think they'll do that again in this game. I really like your pick there, no doubt.
Yeah, and I have a couple more things. So, yes, I agree with you. Ryan Day, their head coach, is basically their play caller. He was their offensive coordinator and play caller before Urban Meyer.
I'm very impressed by him. I've been nothing but impressed by him.
He's done a great job.
Yeah.
Their quarterback, Kyle McCord, like we talked about, he took a little while to come around. Now, it's so nice when you have that insurance policy.
Oh, totally.
But now he's got all of his weapons.
Yes.
He seems to be just kind of in a groove a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think both of these teams, Michigan has that us against the world mentality, going on right now. Ohio State has I think they want some vengeance. They feel like they've lost the last 2 years in a row to a team that was potentially cheating against them.
Right.
So they feel like this is their chance for vengeance. So I think both of those things kind of cancel out. And obviously it's the game,
Yeah.
I think a lot of those emotions cancel out. I just think Ohio State's playing a little bit better right now.
Yeah.
My last point on this is that the last 2 years, Michigan they were tougher. They were more physical.
Yeah.
Now, they did, JJ last year, he did hit some long passes and stuff to kind of pull away from Ohio State. But in general, if you watch both of those games, Michigan was more physical. They were the tougher team. Ryan Day this year, Ohio State, even when they weren't firing on all cylinders, they had a purpose this year to come out and to play more bully ball, be tougher, run it down people's throats, do what they had to do. And we saw that game, the Penn State-Ohio State game. They did not play a finesse game. They played a physical, tough game, especially on defense.
Yeah.
So I don't see the last 2 years there was a big difference between the toughness and the physicality of Michigan versus Ohio State. I think that's even this year.
Yeah.
So that's my last point I wanted to make, and so I definitely feel good about that. Big Mountain Ice Cold Lock for Ohio State.
Two things on this, because this is the biggest game we're picking.
Yes.
I'm going to pick a bunch of really good games
Yes.
too, but this is by far you got two top 4 teams in the country, the biggest game we're going to be talking about.
Right.
And yeah, I would just say we briefly talked about JJ's health coming into last week after the Penn State game. You question whether or not how healthy is he. Now, he has another week, but he also did play.
Yeah.
So if there's any question on him, I've been big on him since the beginning of the season.
Right.
I think he's an absolutely incredible quarterback. But when you're injured, that not only can take a physical toll, it can take a mental toll because you can't do what you are used to doing, and how can you handle that? And maybe we saw a little bit of that in the Maryland game. Does that continue into the Ohio State game? Who knows? The other thing I will say is you mentioned the Ohio State-Penn State game. I would look back to the Ohio State-Notre Dame game.
Yes.
I mean, that really could be, if they win this game, I mean, that's the game that I would look back to. This is the biggest game, but I would look back to that Notre Dame game and say that was I hate to say turning point, but that was the biggest point of their season when they were able to pull that win out in a gutsy manner to get back to your point of just hard-nosed football. Ohio State here is in a really good position to pull. I agree with you, to pull this off straight up.
This isn't a case like in some years where Ohio State was like the Ferrari, just driving 90 miles an hour. They've had to win by being the sledgehammer, by being the bulldozer. Good point about their game, Notre Dame game. All right, so that's all my picks. Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, why don't we go back through these here real quick, and we'll get into the Mountain West.
All right, okay. So I'm going to go just straight down the list, and I have Iowa plus 2.5. I'm taking Penn State to cover 20.5 over Michigan State. Our big Mountain ice cold lock of the week is Ohio State plus 3.5 over Michigan. Indiana plus 3.5. My second Big Mountain ice cold lock was Northwestern plus 5.5 at Illinois, and then Mini plus 2.5 over Wisconsin. And I like Maryland to cover 1.5, basically a coin flip game. So I like Maryland to win this game at Rutgers.
Very good. Let's get into the Mountain West. I've got 2 Friday games in the Mountain West. I am going to start with the game of the week. We talked at our last episode with the rapid reactions about playoffs. Conference championship games. And to me, the winner of this game is absolutely in the conference championship game. We've got Air Force traveling to Boise. The line here is 6.5.
Okay.
Favorite being Boise. Air Force coming into this game on a 3-game skid. 2 really, really difficult losses to Army and then Hawaii. They did bounce back here last week, but not enough to get the job done. And Genty is back. He was back last week for Boise. I think all systems are go here for the Broncos. I mean, once they've hit this conference schedule, they're just a different team.
Yeah.
They're on the blue turf. That always, you got to give them a little bit of extra points there for that home field advantage. Their offense is averaging 35 points a game in conference. The offense I was expecting out of them this whole season. The D is averaging 17 points against in the last 4 games. So both sides of the ball just getting it done for the Broncos. Not surprisingly, I'm wearing my Broncos shirt with the blue. And you know me, I am going with the Broncos. I was big on them in our reaction video. I said I feel you're going to see a Boise State, a UNLV game here in the championship game. I'm going to Boise State. I'm so confident. I'm making this my first of 3 Big Mountain ice cold locks. Boise minus 6.5.
I like it. I mean, at a time where everything's trending up with Boise, everything's trending down with Air Force, just makes total sense. It's kind of crazy that we're going to get this game of the year. It'll be Friday night. That's exciting. So I like your pick.
It's going to be tough. You got Penn State Friday night. You'll probably be watching. Oh, I know, not probably. You will be watching that game.
Yeah, I will.
I'm likely going to be
over.
I'm likely going to be watching this game. I'm really excited for this game. I talked about this in our preview episode. Been waiting for this. I'm glad it is what I thought it would be. Win and you're in type of scenario here.
Just like you predicted at the very beginning of the season.
I will say Zach Larrier, the quarterback for Air Force, is likely to not play. I did see an update on him, and that's a game changer for them. I mean, you have seen what they have been without him.
Yeah.
He is not their whole team. They have a very strong defense. They have a strong running game, but he just brought that little extra to them where he could be the runner. He could also throw. And they've been a different team without him. He's not supposed to be playing. So, Boise all the way.
Since you make that point, I really wonder if Air Force will use that third-string quarterback that came in last week that was able to throw the ball. Could maybe knock Boise off of their game plan, planning on stopping a running quarterback. That'll be interesting to see if they use him.
Yeah. And I've said before, Boise's defense, their weakness is their secondary. That's their weakness here. But if you have a team that's not going to throw a whole lot, they can really bring it in and stop that running game. So I'm really excited for this game. Boise is just has been on a tear here recently. No reason for me to think that ends. So we'll see what happens on the blue turf. I'm really excited. The other Friday game is Utah State at New Mexico. The Lobos coming off a huge upset victory up in Fresno. Utah State here is the favorite at minus 6.5. Utah State, again, averaging 44 points on offense in the last 4 games. I've been talking about how their offense is crazy good, specifically throwing offense. New Mexico has only scored 26 or more points twice all year. Once against Tennessee Tech.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you anything about Tennessee Tech other than New Mexico should probably score more than 26 points against them. And guess who the other team is?
Fresno last week?
UMass.
UMass.
UMass. So not real surprising they're scoring over 26 points against Tennessee Tech and UMass. Utah State, while they're not a great defense, I have been impressed by their defense over the course of the season, quite frankly. And so I am taking Utah State here at minus 6.5. They just have too much offense for the Lobos to keep up. The Lobos are going to score some points for sure. But if I look at these averages, I'm going, okay, 44 Utah State averaging the last 4 games. New Mexico not getting above 26. I'm actually going to pick this game with a point.
Okay.
I'm going to say I see about a 35-24 game here. 35 points for Utah State, about 24 points for the Lobos. That means they easily cover the 6.5. Utah State, minus 6.5.
All right.
The other big game here, San Jose State at UNLV. Again, as we talked about, not quite as big in terms, or not nearly as big as the Boise State and Air Force game in terms of conference game championship implications. Yes, they both still have a chance, but San Jose State has a very, very small chance to get in. UNLV's all but locked to get in. I don't know how that will play into this game for UNLV specifically. UNLV is the 2.5-point favorite here. I really love this line for UNLV. I mean, they have been pure beast mode for like the entire season, for Pete's sake. And I have no reason to believe they don't just keep rolling through this game. UNLV is a team that has scored under 30 points only 3 times this year. So I talk about San Jose State's offense and how they can score points. Hey, UNLV's right there with you, Spartans. They can score too. Two of the times they didn't score 30 was one against Michigan. Can you blame them? And the other one was against Fresno, a Fresno team that did have Keene in that game. Was a huge game at the time. And then they have only given up more than 30 points 3 times this year. Again, Fresno, Michigan being 2 of those 3 games. So you kind of remove the Michigan-Fresno game, and UNLV's just been crazy good. So I am taking the Rebels at -2.5. I think they roll right into this championship game. As I said in our reaction, I got the Rebels. I got the Broncos in the championship game. I think that could be a fantastic Mountain West championship.
And I'm sure UNLV would love to host this championship game instead of traveling to either Boise or Air Force. So I think that'll be some good motivation for them.
No way anybody wants to travel to Boise. I can tell you that.
No.
My next one is my Pokes. The Wyoming Cowboys travel to Nevada. We've talked about a little bit of the struggle they've had away from Laramie. Undefeated at home this year, and really just a different team when they play at home. They play with all kinds of moxie and just blowing people up. Not as much the case when they go away from Laramie, and specifically the last 2 games, really a bit of a disappointment for them, quite frankly. But Nevada is not the teams that they have been playing away. They played Air Force away. They played Boise away. UNLV away. So they're playing the top of the pack here in terms of the away games. So I say they struggle away, and they haven't won away, but they played UNLV, Air Force, Boise, Texas. I mean, these are the games they're playing away, for Pete's sake. So I'm not sure they necessarily beat those teams at home. But they're coming off just an incredibly great game against Hawaii. And, I think now is a good time as any that they get their first road win of the season. Nice. I mean, this team is way better than not winning on the road this year, for crying out loud. And to get an 8-win season. I said back long ago, you've given me a few praises where they easily get 6, maybe 7 or 8. This win gets them to 8. It'd be the first time since 2019 since they have 8 wins. And if they win this game, go on to a bowl for a victory, that's a 9-win season, which would be the first under Coach Bowl. He's certainly due for that. I'm big into Wyoming here. They're -10.5 against the Wolfpack. The Wolfpack has shown that they can keep games somewhat close this year. I'm going to ride the Pokes here, coming off a huge win. I think they want to get to 8 wins. I think they certainly don't want to get skunked on the road this year. I'm taking the Cowboys -10.5. The next one, Fresno State going down to San Diego State. Fresno State on a 2-game losing streak.
Don't know what happened to them.
Good news for the Bulldogs. Keene is supposed to be playing in this game. Difference maker, absolutely. I've said the past 2 weeks, not a huge drop-off between him and Fife. I was wrong. A much larger drop-off when you look at Fife's numbers. He's just not able to get it done. And their running game is not there to produce without Keene. The running game needs Keene in order to produce any sort of significant runs. It's not like, we're just going to go to the running game and they'll produce for us. Ain't going to happen there in Fresno. They have to have Keene.
It's almost McKean's passing game. Those short, accurate passes are almost like a replacement for a running game.
Right. Yes, for sure. So I don't give San Diego State much home field advantage here. It's down there, but you've seen they can't bring people into the stadium for various reasons. I won't get into that. So there's certainly not a huge home field here. Fresno State -5.5 favorite. And yes, I'm going with pretty much all favorites right now. But if you would have told me this game was -5.5 2 weeks ago, I would have said, bet the house on it. I can't do that right now coming off of 2 losses for Fresno. But that's just not a great line here. I like Fresno, especially with Keene playing, assuming he's pretty healthy and able to play the entire game. they should roll here through San Diego State. I know San Diego State's had some good games here recently, but the Bulldogs are the better team, no doubt about it. So I'm taking Fresno State Bulldogs at -5.5 with a big mountain ice cold lock.
Love it.
Last one, CSU at Hawaii. Line is 5.5. The Rainbows D just gives up a lot of points over the course of the season. Colorado State has a good passing game. They've shown that they can put up points. I'm guessing this is going to be a pretty high-scoring game. I mean, the Rainbows can throw the ball pretty well. They actually had pretty good success against San Diego State 4 or 5 weeks ago, showing what they can do against a decent defense. So I'm going to go with the stronger offense here. The stronger offense in my book is the Rams of Colorado State. I'm taking Colorado State at -5.5. Steve, I have three other picks.
Okay.
3 other picks.
Lay them on us.
So the first one, UTSA at Tulane. I have been saying for a little while now, I just feel like Tulane is due for a loss. They've had some very close games over the past 4 weeks, and this UTSA offense is legit. Frank Harris, their quarterback, he's a star. He set a school record last week, 523 total yards. Look out, Tulane. Look out, Green Wave. This Roadrunner team is serious.
This is a huge game with national implications for college football playoff, the New Year's Six Bowls, all kinds of stuff. So this is a huge, important game. And a lot of the national pundits kind of have Tulane locked into one of those New Year's Six Bowls. So I'm interested to see how this goes.
And the Roadrunners, you got to think they're coming into this ready to knock this team off. UTSA is on a 7-game winning streak. The only losses this year to Houston, Army, and Tennessee. And the Tennessee team's a pretty darn good team. During that winning streak, they've averaged 41 points for. I'm telling you, Green Wave, watch out. The Roadrunners, now it is in Tulane, but the Roadrunners are getting 3.5 points. I like this game to stay close because of that offense for the Roadrunners. So I'm taking UTSA plus 3.5. Next one, Washington State goes to Washington. The line here is 16.5. Couple different things I want to point out in this game. Item number 1, could this be a trap game for the University of Washington? We have seen over the season, they've had some down games after they play these big games, after the Oregon game, after some of these other high games. They've had some down games against opponents that just aren't great. Specifically, I'll point out the Arizona State game, the Stanford game. Yes, they won the game. They're able to do what they need to do, but just didn't get up for it.
Had some strange games.
And they had a real hard game last week against Oregon State. I mean, Oregon State was darn close to knocking them off there in that game. So, could this be a bit of a trap game between that, their last game of the season against a Washington State team that has underachieved slightly, looking ahead to, I would assume, Oregon in the Pac-12 game. So I got a potential trap game situation here for the Huskies. And I will also say Washington State, while they did, before the win last week to Colorado, they had lost 7 straight. Yep. They were, for the most part, they were close games. They weren't getting blown out or anything like that. They kept them games. They just weren't able to get wins. And the spread here is just too high for me, Steve. With all these intangibles, I'm going to take the points. People might think I'm a little nuts. I'm going to take the points plus 16.5 for the Washington State Cougars. I think they beat that spread. Washington doesn't have a ton to play for in this game. Maybe they even bring Penix out in the second half. Who knows? But I like Washington State getting these points.
One thing to point out is this is the Apple Cup. Washington State and Washington play. This is rivalry week.
Yes, rivalry week.
Cup.
Yep.
And I think I did see that they agreed to extend playing this game at least for the next 2 years, maybe even 6 years. I think. Okay. I might have seen. So you make a good point. So it's a big spread. I really like Washington just in general.
Yes.
But this is a big spread, and like you mentioned, there's been some games where they had some letdowns and lost by. I mean, they didn't cover the spread a lot of times this year. Right?
No, they have not.
And big games.
I'm going on intangibles in this game. I'll be honest with you. This is more intangibles, and Washington State has a good quarterback.
Yeah.
Ward. Ward. He doesn't get a lot of because of the Penix and these other quarterbacks. But, if this gets into a bit of an offensive run and gun type of game, Washington State can stay there with them. So
I think after like week 4 or 5, after Washington State had beaten Oregon State early in the season,
right.
Cam Ward was actually, his name was right there with Penix as being a Heisman Trophy contender.
Yep.
Now, obviously, losing 6 or 7 games in a row, that kind of just took it out. But he's still a good quarterback.
The wins don't stack up for him, but his stats do.
Yeah.
His stats do. So the last one I'm going to do here is two teams. We talked about Kansas long ago. I picked them maybe week, 3 or 4. It's been a long time. But we haven't talked about the Cincinnati Bearcats at all. So I'm going to pick the Kansas at Cincy game. The line here is 6.5. The quarterback for Kansas, Jason Bean, is supposed to be available for this game. He hasn't been the past few games, and what would be their third string quarterback has struggled a bit getting the offense going. But Bean's a different story. He is supposed to play. As I said, Kansas did not have him the past 2 games against Texas Tech and Kansas State. Very close game against Kansas State, even without Bean. I think the Jayhawks just roll through the Bearcats here. This is one of those lines where I go, is this a little too good to be true? Which is usually a kind of a trap line when you look at it. But, Cincy just having a really down year, one league win or one conference win so far. So I am taking the Jayhawks minus 6.5, and I am making it a Big Mountain ice cold lock.
Yeah, I think Cincy last year they're coming off of a good couple seasons. The last couple before this year.
Yep.
This year they've just been totally off, and the game is at Cincy, and they played really well the last 2 or 3 years at home.
Yes.
That hasn't necessarily been the case this year. So as far as the line, I wonder if Vegas is just kind of giving them a little bit of credit, like we talked about Purdue before, giving them a little credit for what happened the last couple of years.
Yeah,
so.
And they have been a good team at home, recently. So I can totally understand that. But I just think the Kansas offense is going to cover that spread. At least I hope. I'm making it a lock.
All right.
I got 3 locks. I got to get back to 500 on my locks. I like all 3 of them. The other one I'm going to throw out there, I'm going to do an early line lock right now, okay?
Okay.
So this is for a December 1st game right now on FanDuel.
Okay.
You can get the Huskies against the Ducks.
Okay.
The line is 7.5 is the line. I've said before, I like the Ducks in that game. But at 7.5 with the Huskies getting the points.
7.5 points.
7.5 points. Get the Huskies now plus 7.5. That'll carry over to our next week.
Yeah.
But I'm not making it a lock, but I am making it an early line pick. Get the 7.5 with the Huskies.
Yeah, I can't see. There's almost no way that line's going to stay at 7.5 unless something were to happen to Penix or whatever.
Right,
so,
exactly. And so the only time, to me, the only reason I don't like that is injuries happen this week, which again gets back to my Washington pick.
Yeah.
Do they maybe look to sit players in the second half? I don't know if they will or they won't, but I really like the Huskies getting over a touchdown here in that game. Yeah. So I had to get that out there because when I saw it today, I went, wow, that's a good pick to get.
I might have to jump on that as soon as we're done here.
Yeah. So, hey, let's go back over these real quick. We've got in the Mountain West, I'm taking Boise State at minus 6.5 with a Big Mountain ice cold lock. I've got Utah State minus 6.5 at New Mexico. Taking UNLV, I am thinking they keep right on rolling here at minus 2.5 versus San Jose State. I'm taking the Pokes of Wyoming going down to Nevada at minus 10.5. I like the Bulldogs to come back after a couple disappointing games to cover that 5.5 at San Diego State, and then CSU to cover 5.5 at Hawaii. Then going to my other picks, I've got the Roadrunners getting 3.5 points against Tulane. I just feel like Tulane is due for a loss, and I think the Roadrunners are going to stick it to them. I also am taking the points of 16.5 with Washington State. I just think they keep it closer than that. And then I'm taking the Jayhawks at minus 6.5 with my third Big Mountain ice cold lock over the Bearcats. And then get on FanDuel, get that 7.5 points that you can get with the Huskies in the Pac-12 championship game for next week. And with that, hey, we thank you for watching. Let's get our bets in. We're coming down to the final week before we get to championship week here. Hard to believe we're here already. We've had a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys have too. Let's win some money here on this last week. We'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.